Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murder. This is Jeff Jones, and with me today is the panel, and let me introduce them from the top to the bottom and say hello to Kelly. Hey, Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. I heard that the rally did well over the weekend. Hats off to you all for attending and supporting the boys, and yeah, it's good to be back.
Good to have you back as usual, and Big Jeff.
Hey Jeff, how you doing today? It's a hot one here today in New England, and I'm looking forward to this one. Anytime the subject is Brendan, it just gets my blood boiling, and I'm ready to really attack this one with some veracity.
Well, I like to hear that because those days that you get fired up, Big Jeff, you get me fired up too. So I can't wait to see. I'm glad you have a lot of energy on your side today. And Jack, welcome back again to the show.
Thanks, appreciate it. Hello, everybody in live chat. Thanks for coming. Yeah, it's been an interesting day here about 3:45 in Southwest Michigan, and our part of our little county, city, whatever. Power went out, and there's 13,000 plus without power. They're saying it's going to be restored at 8 o'clock. Yeah, okay, we'll see. But fortunately, I have a generator, and oldest son came over and got everything switched over. Well, at least some things switched over, enough to give me power and get the modem plugged in, and there was power. It fired up, so that's a good sign anyway. So, yep, like Big Jeff, I'm eager to get started and talk about Brendan and get this guy that's on our screen's face off and move on.
We love the police. The other family obviously doesn't. So, but yeah, we owe a lot to them for the work that they've done for my family and for Theresa.
So there's my callback saying, "Oh, there's no such thing as innocent until proven guilty." We're sure that we're sure that he did it to the point we're going to make smug jokes about it. You know what I mean? It's just unbelievably uncalled for him to be making such accusations. What's he running for office or something like that? He's going to get his face in front of the camera. It's not the time for the family to comment. Sit back and just let the trial play out. We don't need to hear your 2 cents.
Yeah, but Big Jeff, that Judge Willis had basically told the lawyers, shut the hell up. So what did the lawyers or state and the cops do? They went to the family and said, "Hey, you need to speak for us. Thanks."
And he was so willing to do it. You
Absolutely.
Shouldn't have a comment. It's just so uncertain.
That's right.
Particularly with Brendan, that even if you believe Stephen was guilty, that Brendan did a damn thing. It's just not believe. Why should you be getting your face out into the camera and acting like you're certain that he did it? Well, we love the police. They can't be wrong. My ass, they can't be wrong. It's just ridiculous.
Absolutely, it is.
He never got into trouble before at all. He was always a good kid. Even the school wants him to come back to school. And my son always tells me, blame it on Mark. Blame it on Mark. And that's who I'm blaming.
As we said in the last podcast, she's sitting in the court going, "This is bullshit. What he's saying on the stand. He's lying on the stand." She says it to the Making a Murderer film crew that he just lied on the stand.
Well, like Jeff, like we talked about in the last episode, how many times did he say, "Oh, just tell the truth. It'll be okay." And it was even pointed out, as we said, by the various judges from the Seventh Circuit, that that there was an appearance that they were telling him, if you tell us what you want to hear, then everything's going to be okay. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? So that was Wiegert and Fassbender saying it. So when she says, "I blame Mark for saying all these lies," the lie that she was particularly talking about was the fact that they asked her whether or not she wanted to be in, but that was only one of the many lies. It'll be okay. We just need to hear it from you. Is going to be another one, and the truth of that, the reason I can say with certainty that that was a lie is because of what Jack pointed out in the last podcast. The very end, he's thinking he's going to go back to school to turn in his project in the 7th hour or the 7th period or 6th hour, 6th period, whatever it is. He doesn't have any concept of what the police just got him to do. And it's all because it's all going to be okay, Brendan. No problem. You just tell us the truth, and it's all going to be fine. It was all a lie. It was perceived as Brendan as being something completely different than it ended up being, and that kid paid the price, a dear price, the biggest screw job of all times.
And not only that, we can't forget that an hour and 38 minutes of this. What Kratz said, we have to play it all. Sorry, guys, got to list all this. Oh, wait, we're going to cut an hour and 8 minutes out of it. You don't get to hear it all. It's just, I think there was a plan going in, him saying that to get everybody all riled up and jacked up, said, okay. And then they come along and say, well, he didn't really say anything in this part here. The jury doesn't need to hear that they got into his head. Come on, let's go. And why the defense would the defense agree to that? I don't get it.
Blows my mind too.
There come a time where you re-interviewed Kayla Avery?
We did. Shortly after Brendan was arrested, actually. I believe it was March 7th of 2006. Kayla came out and told us quite a few things at that point. Basically, she indicated to us that Brendan had told Kayla that he had went and got the mail and went over to Stephen Avery's residence and went into the residence and observed Theresa Halbach pinned up in Steve Avery's bedroom. Kayla went on to tell us how Brendan described seeing body parts later that day or that evening in the fire behind Steve Avery's residence.
Good morning. How old are you, Kayla?
15.
And how are you related to Brendan?
We're first cousins. My dad is Barbara's brother, and Brennan's Barbara's son.
Okay, very good. I want to direct your attention to a time in December of 2005. Did you have a conversation with Brendan about Theresa Halbach?
Kinda, yeah.
All right, would you tell us about that conversation with Brendan?
Well, not in December, in November.
Okay, tell us about it.
In November, we were having a birthday party. He was sitting in our hallway, and he was just sitting there. One of my friends looked out the door and seen him crying, and then she came to me. And then I went out there by him, and I asked him what was wrong, and all he did is shrugged his shoulders.
Okay, and then what did you ask?
And then I asked him if it was about the Stephen thing, and then he just shrugged his shoulders, and I was like, you can talk to me, and then I just went back inside my room.
Tell us about the conversation you had with Brendan regarding Stephen.
We didn't have a conversation about it.
Didn't you tell your counselors at school about a conversation you had with Brendan?
Yeah.
All right. And you told officers Wiegert and Fassbender about that conversation as well, right?
Yes.
These two guys right here. You recognize those two guys?
Yes.
That's okay. You told them about a conversation you had with Brendan about that bonfire and what was in the bonfire. Tell us about that.
I really don't remember.
All right. Now, Kayla, did you give the officers a statement?
Yeah.
All right. Kayla, I'm showing you what has been marked for identification as this Exhibit 163. Would you hold that for me, please? All right. I'm going to take my seat here and ask you. And is that the statement that you gave to Officers Fassbender and Wiegert?
Yes.
All right. Does reviewing that statement help you remember?
Yes.
All right. What did Brendan tell you about the fire? You'll have to pull the microphone a little closer so we can hear you.
He didn't tell me anything. I kind of made up the statement, and I'm sorry.
All right. What did you make up? Tell us what you saying you made up.
That he seen body parts in there. He didn't see it. He didn't tell me anything like that, or he didn't see Jesus' body or anything like that.
And you also told the officers in a separate conversation that day that Brendan had seen Theresa alive in Stephen's trailer, and that she was pinned up in a chair.
Yes, but that's not true.
All right. So you're telling us you made something up to get Brendan into trouble?
Not really. I was just really confused about everything.
No further questions for this witness?
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a real wow factor right there.
Yeah, that would have been a bit of a shock for them. You can see that they were kind of like, oh my Lord. The thing is, this is like a bittersweet thing, I think, in the moment of Brendan Dassey's trial. You've got a girl that, has recanted basically her entire testimony or her statement. Unfortunately, the damage was already done. I think, if anything, the perception of it may not have been, oh, the girl lied and it's not just true. More the fact that they now probably think, oh, she just feels terrible, and the family have convinced her to take it all back and say it was a lie to protect Brendan. So it became more of a protect your family, how could you do this, versus she actually finally just told the truth that she lied. I think that sucks in terms of, I don't even know how to say it. It's just such a big, basically fuckery and mockery of what she did to Brendan. But it takes a lot of balls to sit up there, have everyone on you, and then own your mistake, own what you did. So again, that's why I said it's bittersweet. It's good that she finally admitted it, but I think the damage was already done.
I mean, obviously that's what led them down the road, right? Like, without these statements she made, they had no, I don't know if probable cause is the correct word, but they had no reason to go and re-interview Brendan. So as you said, damage done. Not quite the star witness they were hoping for. That kind of fell apart in their laps. I kind of wonder sometimes, how did it fall apart for the prosecution there? Because I'm sure that they thought that was going to go differently.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I mean, I'm actually surprised. Maybe it happens. I just don't remember. You'd think that, because she recanted that testimony and the prosecution didn't force her to read it or anything like that. But there was a couple of things said about what she said that he saw. That he told her he saw. Sorry for all that reference. You'd think that the defense would ask the judge to, request that the jury disregard anything that they heard about that, right? Because just the fact that they were able to utter it in the first place, if she's not giving credence to that statement, then it doesn't seem to me that statement is admissible as evidence. Yet you just heard the prosecution allude to what that statement says. if she says it didn't happen, it would make sense to sort of at least alert the jury to the fact that, look, you should disregard anything you heard regarding the contents of that statement because it's been recanted. So I'm not sure they actually do that, but it seems to me that that's something that should have happened. Not that it would make a difference, just because I think Kelly's right that, you know, again, the deck was just so stacked against Brendan with Stephen's conviction, with the March press conference, that he just had too high of a hurdle to jump over to see innocence with this jury.
I'm going to come right in on my Candy horse. So just for everyone out there, I mean, the follows the case, they know who Candy Avery is, but for those that don't understand the connection, Candy Avery is married to Earl, Stephen's youngest brother, and she had children of her own. That, you know, this is, you know, Kayla and Marie, and there was actually an older daughter, I cannot remember her name, that she had from a previous relationship, you know, that gets brought into the family. So these are stepchildren, basically, of Earl. And, you know, and Candy, you know, that's briefly her connection to the Averys. There's also other information that, you know, that's out there that, again, people that have been around the case, they understand this, but because of, you know, certain things, we don't know everything that happened behind the scenes in the family, but there are things that happened when Stephen was going to get his money that he made it pretty clear who was going to get money and who wasn't. And Candy was on the out. He said she wasn't going to get a damn dime. She knew it. And, you know, so I think we can't really completely forget about that part. It's not talked about a huge amount, but it is talked about. So that's another reference. So this bad blood, you know, when all these things happened, and we, you know, happened in 2004, this investigation that happened between this relationship between Stephen and Marie, it was investigated. It did get closed. They didn't find anything that they could charge him with. There were love letters apparently that Marie wrote to Stephen. You know, again, this is a big disdain for, I think, for all of us, this relationship, because she was so young. She absolutely had no idea what she was doing. You know, she only saw a lot of attention from an older man, step-uncle or not, and money, this potential windfall of money. These are poor people. So when somebody's potentially going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars, even maybe more, I mean, come on. I'm sure that was an attractive thing to her, getting her out of this poor life. It's not like they starved, but they didn't have a lot, you know. So this whole surrounding thing that I just really bugging my side about Candy, I feel strongly about it. I have for a long time. Some of it's opinion, some of it's speculation, but there is truth to a lot of that's underlying everything that I've said. Because I have serious issues here, because, you know, we have to remember that Kayla's 14, I think, in this time frame. And so this whole side story, you know, it began, you know, over a year earlier. This is April, I think, of 2007. And over a year earlier, Candy had been going behind everyone's back to Fassbender, possibly Uyghur, but definitely Fassbender, we know for sure. And I think she was also in contact with Wendy Baldwin. So, you know, I guess the bigger story, this is my opinion. I'm not saying anyone here should believe me or needs to believe me. This is just my observations over time. You have Candy in the background, and she's seething mad at Avery for screwing what she believes that, whether they did or didn't, she believes that Marie and Stephen hooked up a couple times. She's seething mad about it, and she's going to get her pound of flesh. And I fully believe this is based on not only what we have in paper. This is based on some of the phone calls that people can go listen to. They're out there between Brendan and it's mainly his mom, but he also talks to Candy. There's also some contact between him and Marie and Kayla, but then all of a sudden he's not allowed to talk to him. He can't get a hold of anyone. And this is all manipulated apart from Candy. She acts like she's all sweet and wonderful and at one time, and then later on, boom, the knife gets shoved in. I'm getting off track here. My point here is that do we not think that Kayla as a 14-year-old is going to talk to her sister and her mom about anything that she perceives to say, Brendan told me about all this stuff, man. Come on, we got to go talk to somebody. I have to believe that. I mean, she's at that age, she's certainly immature, but at the same time, she seems to be pretty much in control of what she's saying. I do think she was manipulated by her mother. This is me again talking because she was so pissed at Stephen. She's going to get her pound, and to do that, this connection to Brendan, and he lost weight because he was so upset about all this terrible things that happened to Theresa that he saw and took part in. It's dreadful. Anyway, she did recant. I think Jeff summed that up really well. So that's my 2 cents for now.
You know what I think is more likely, Jack, was that young people being young people. It wouldn't surprise me if occasionally when they would get together as a family, boys would take it upon themselves to say horrible things just to terrorize their younger female family members. Right? That's something that boys do, especially teenage boys. So it wouldn't surprise me if somebody did say to Kayla, not because there's any truth to it, but just to terrorize her. Oh yeah, blood seeps up through the cracks in the garage after it rains. Brendan did see something in the past. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody did say something like that to her. Not Brendan, and not in confidence, and not in any way trying to get something off his chest. But it wouldn't surprise me if somebody did say something like that, just to kind of as almost like a campfire horror story type of event, just simply meant to terrorize her, and make her feel uncomfortable because that's what boys do to girls of that age.
Yeah, that is definitely a possibility. Another thing that we can never forget is that there was rampant rumorage going around the school, several of the schools. We know that for a fact because there was a rumor that got started that this camera that Uyghur suddenly gets interested in October of 2006 after, again, almost a year. He gets interested in that camera, had to have it because there was a rumor that there were photographs taken of Theresa and all these things happening to her floating around. And that rumor occurred, as I recall, at the school. So you're probably right.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it kind of in between both of you gentlemen in terms of I always think, where did this start? It had to have started from somewhere. And I agree that it seems like there was like an influence in the background in her ear. But for me, as a woman who has been a young teenage female, I only think of one key word as well, and that's attention seeking. Could it be there's so much, like it was such a big thing in the family and younger teenagers just want to feel like they're a part of it. They're hearing all these things. Maybe her intentions was also what I was saying, the keyword attention. She just wanted to fit in there. She over-exaggerated things she heard and then she realized that people were like, oh my God, really? And the attention was coming onto her. So the more attention you get, the bigger it kind of goes. It goes from him sitting in a hallway, shrugs his shoulder, and then it turns into the next conversation it got bigger. It became body parts and toes and all these things. So I'm kind of in between. It stemmed from somewhere in terms of the influence I agree with J Jax, but then I also agree with Big Jeff in terms of I think that the influence came with a rumor, which came from exaggeration, which came from rumors, and then she saw that as a window of opportunity of attention, and she took it. Again, that's my personal opinion. That's just from hearing it and watching it and bouncing off everyone's idea here.
Hard to miss some of that, right?
Yes.
Grim details were made public yesterday. Bones and teeth of an adult female were found on the Avery property.
Investigators found pieces of bone and teeth on the Avery property.
According to Brendan Dassey's statements to police, he came home from school and went to Stephen Avery's trailer to give him his mail.
Dassey told prosecutors that his uncle Stephen had Theresa Halbach shackled to his bed naked.
The complaint says they continue to torture and manually strangle her. They then put her body in a fire pit, investigators say, throwing bed sheets on top of the fire and scattering some of the remains in a nearby gravel pit.
Did you know about that burn pit behind Stephen's garage?
Yes, I heard it on the news.
Read it in the news?
Yes.
Did you read that they found body parts in the burn pit too?
Yes.
When they spoke to you, did they ask you specifically about the burn pit and the body parts?
Yes.
So when you say you told them you saw body parts, it was in response to a question they asked you about that?
Yes.
Do you think there's some sort of talk in the family or collusion going on where these people are kind of rosying up their stories to each other?
I mean, I think, yeah, she's trying to protect a family member just like I think the rest of the family, or most families would. So.
But the seriousness of, I mean, if she is trying to protect Brendan by not telling the truth on the witness stand, I mean, that's pretty serious business.
I agree that it is very serious. She should be telling what she knows, but she didn't. She chose to basically lie on the stand. So that was her choice, and I think that came across to the jury. Then there's really not much we can do about it anymore.
He could be sued for defamation for saying that. He just accused her of perjury, which is a federal offense. Unless you can prove that that's not the case, that's defamation, it just goes to show you, the guy's he's running his mouth. He's got no business running his mouth. He's making a jerk out of himself. That's what he's doing. He might firmly believe that what he says is true, just as we in this podcast firmly believe what we say is true. But we make an effort not to say things about private citizens. And most of the people that we talk about are public people. That really could cause people, harm or character defamation. What he's talking about on television, saying, "Oh, she lied. She definitely lied. She should be telling what she knows." Sorry, that's unless you can prove that she said, that she knew something different than she didn't, you oughtn't be saying that, right? Because that is something that you get sued for.
I was going to say, it kind of, what he just said was what I feared would be the interpretation of the recanting of Kayla. That's where their minds were going. It wasn't the fact that she was telling the truth and that she lied, and that was the face value of the whole entire situation. No, they took it as this whole family are now conspiring together as a unit and trying to now help their family members. And he just said it. And it's so disappointing that, I guess, disappointing for us because we see a girl that, took it back because that was the truth. Just like we saw it with Brendan. He spat out all this shit that was fed to him and then he recanted it immediately after. But it's never good enough. That's the saddest thing. It's never good enough. The truth, they always say, just tell the truth. But here's that famous quotation from the movie. They can't handle the truth. They don't like it. The truth hurts their case, so they don't want to use it. It's just it's just hypocrisy in its finest, and it just drives me nuts watching this.
Why doesn't the press do its job and ask Mike Halbach if they had a shackle to the bed? Where were the marks? Right? Where are the marks from where the handcuffs would have been around, or the chains, or whatever they are, would have been around the bedposts? Where are they? Where's her DNA on the handcuffs? Where's her DNA on these toy leg irons that they actually retrieved from Stephen's apartment? The ones that they retrieved were toys. Where are those? Why don't they ask Mike Halbach those questions? The thing is, when you stick your hands right into the fire, you can expect to get burned. If he's going to run his mouth, he puts himself in the position of having to respond to these questions about where the forensic evidence is, and since there's none, he should have to explain where he thinks it is and why there's none of it there.
Because mainstream media have a narrative of their own, and they go with what sells, what's popular, and what is more controversial in terms of what benefits them. They want to sell this horror fucking story that this is what happened. And I think as we're getting to see cases now in this generation and this timeline in our life, that when they are putting out the cases for us to see, and we're getting to now see live stream trials, we're now finally understanding how mainstream media have been directing our point of views this whole entire time. It's people are starting to wake up and see that this is a bigger picture, that we always take what happens in the courtroom from these reporters, and we're now finding out that what they're reporting is not actually what's happening. And I think it's such a big broad of like how the justice system works, in terms of you have what's happening inside the courtroom, and again it kind of is where we're listening to people's interpretation, and they're coming out and they're giving us how they interpret it, and then their twist of how they want to sell it. And it's disgusting, but that's just how mainstream media is, unfortunately. But I agree, a good journalist would be like giving him the hard questions, bringing the devil's advocate to him and saying, you want to say it, let me ask you these questions. But they don't. Unfortunately, it wasn't a popular opinion. It was Stephen Avery, Brennan Dassey were the murderers, and the mainstream media obviously ran with it.
Well, just to add to that, we talked about these reporters before, and I'm sure we will again, because they play a huge part in this case. But who's to say the questions weren't asked and we don't see it? Got cut, got clipped, right? We talked about the context of some of these other questions that were asked last week. This all plays a part into, as Kel and Jeff have alluded to, this whole surrounding thing about the media and what sells. That's all they care about. I don't care what anyone says. Their interest is in making money. And how do they do that? They ramp up a story and they write it. So, but I think there's a potential that someone did it, and maybe not this guy, did ask the hard questions, and it got clipped. Number two, did you guys notice when he's talking here how many times he shrugged his shoulders? I think I counted 6 times in that short amount of time. It's just he kept shrugging his shoulders. That's a tell. For me, that's a tell. Final thing, I don't know if you got Big Jeff or Kel or Jeff. Can you guys remember if Mike Halbach had said he hadn't watched Brendan's interrogation, the full interrogation? I can't remember if he did or not. I
seem to recall him saying that he didn't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I also because we're just touching base a little bit on the Halbachs, do you think, I think this comes up a lot in the community in terms of, he says, we've heard him say, we trust the police, we love our police department, they're doing their jobs. Do we still think that from this point on in time, we're now in 2022, do we think that maybe they have watched Making a Murderer and are following the case, or do you think that law enforcement are responsible for convincing them that Stephen Avery and Brennan Dassey are the ones responsible for their daughter, for their sister's death, and they are just ultimately convinced of their guilt, versus do you think they might have had time to now question it, or do you think that they are just so stuck in that belief that that's why we don't hear from them, because they've made their mind up? They don't need to see a documentary. They don't need to follow the case. Kathleen is probably pissing them off more than anything. And just a feel of it, because we're seeing him more and more, and he's more and more pushing the narrative of the guilt. He's convinced of it. So I thought we'll capture this moment just to say, ask the panel, ask the viewers, because they'll be in the chat at this stage, what do we all think? Do we think that they believe it? Do we think that it's a little bit of a multiple choice here. Do we believe they think it? Back then, they were convinced. And in terms of now, do you think that they're still following it, or do you think they ignore it?
Let me combine the last two comments that we were talking about. One was about the media and how about the media is salacious and they go after the story and it's always turned into whatever they want. And that's my answer for the Halbach's perspective. That's what they're going to say about Making a Murderer, is that that's just a documentary that spun the facts to make it look like Stephen Avery wasn't guilty so they could sell a film. And I bet you that a lot of it goes to that as an excuse, whether it's true or not. I think that deep down, and my second point is that people believe what they want to believe, whether it's the truth or it's not. And I had this conversation with someone today, and they said, I bet you there are people, or someone else said that there are people who still believe Stephen Avery is responsible for the rape of Penny Berenstein. And he wasn't, and they won't get over it. And so I don't think that they even give it a thought. That's my opinion, but I don't know them, and that's just my opinion. Over.
Well, I'll go next. Kelly always asks the hardest questions. Here's what I think. I think that to some extent, well, not to some extent, to the full extent, I feel for the Halbachs for the loss of their daughter and sister. I can't imagine how I would feel, and I think what I would want is closure. And all the documentary offers, what's the opposite of closure? Openature. I don't want the Band-Aid. I don't want this wound which has closed up, and I have a reasonable explanation for this. I found a monster. The monster's in prison. The thought of the possibility that the wool got pulled over my eyes is not something. Yeah, exactly. The thought that the wool might have got pulled over my eyes is not even the thought that I'm going to entertain. So I can see how that's too dark of a road to even go down mentally for them. As far as the first part of your question was, do I believe that I think the police they bought the police's narrative specifically because it was an easy one to swallow. And it was believable from the perspective of your daughter just had to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and ran into this monster, this psychopath. Okay, that's unfortunate, but it's believable in today's day and age, and we're just gonna follow it through to the end. That's kind of how I view what they're going through. Of course, none of that makes sense from Stephen's history. She ran into this monster just 2 days before Kasurek was supposed to do his deposition for 1985, and so make sure you close your mind to that. But believe us that he's got these tendencies, and out of nowhere, with no other history, he's going to take this woman captive and murder her and burn her, dismember her and burn her. That's what we want you to believe. So they were not willing to sort of think and process all that. I don't think I would be either. It's just It's if the only thing I think that I would be doing differently than the Halbachs, when I would not be sticking my face on camera and making these wild assertions that I have no way to prove or are even believable.
Just a couple of points. I'm going to, to answer Kel's question. I think that personally, Wiegert, Poggle especially, was probably a big part. Kratz probably, and Fassbender. I personally think they were camped out pretty heartily at the Halbachs, either in person or by telephone, and talking it up about, selling this story about, as Jeff said, the psychopath got a hold of her. She's wrong, bad place at the wrong time. And, he did all these horrific things. And I'm going to say something, and I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm saying this for context, because this affected, me and my family to such a degree, even, every day of our life since then. But after Caitlin passed away, we look for something, especially in the beginning. You look for something to blame or someone to blame. You're so desperate to find that reason as to why this could have possibly happened. And it doesn't matter the circumstance. A loss of a child is a loss of a child. And so you're looking, you're searching around hard. Your mind has got to find some way to justify the loss of this young life. And, so, and I think, juries are the same way. Judges, they want this outlet to be able to say, well, this is what happened over here. This is why she lost her life. So from that perspective, for the Halbachs, I think personally that most of them have accepted what the police have believed, but almost bet within that family, maybe not the immediate family, but possibly, but certainly within the entirety of the family, there are some that are questioning what the hell really, they're keeping up. They're questioning what the hell really happened. There's far too much out there now. I mean, we're 2 months, 10 weeks maybe away since Christina got the blunt, the Disturbed Earth unfiled warrant with the blunt and bloody instrument in the back of the RAV. There's just absolutely, I believe that there's some probably in the family that we haven't and may never hear from that are questioning what really happened.
We believe Brendan's going to testify. If at the last second he says, I'm not testifying, that's his choice. But how Brendan stands up to cross-examination is anyone's guess. He might just roll up into a shell. I mean, I can see where he might just not even answer any questions. So that could be interesting. I mean, I don't think Brendan's the key to this, but the person you see in the courtroom every day, sitting there staring at his fingers, that's Brendan. That's not an act. That really is Brendan. So, like I say, he's not a sophisticated person. He's not gonna put on a show for anyone.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer. Maybe this is me talking off the cuff, but wouldn't you try to cross-examine Brendan before putting him on the stand? Wouldn't you have someone say, hey, we're going to do a dry run. This guy's going to be asking you a lot of probing questions, and we want to see how you react to it. Am I just thinking that that's from a movie or something, or maybe?
I'm not sure that's the equation, Jeff. That's certainly one, or let me rephrase that. That's the whole equation. I think the whole, that's part of the equation, but the whole equation involves the lawyer's interpretation of how the trial is going so far. And I think the reason that you put a defendant on the stand is because you believe that, that the only way that he's going to get out of this is if he tells some level of convincing story to the jury. I think Brendan is completely incapable of that. As a matter of fact, I think the level of coherence that we see from Brendan in this testimony he's about to give is atypically coherent. So I think they did a quote unquote good job of preparing him for being able to tell the story that he's about to tell. But I don't think it helped him any. As a matter of fact, I think the more coherent he comes off, it's actually the worse for him. If he had came off as some type of, if he had really come off as some type of, mentally deficient teenage youth that he is, and kind of answered and shook his head and kept that same demeanor, I think that might have actually been better for him than coming off as somewhat coherent. But that's just me. I mean, probably anything that he did was was not high enough jump for the hurdle that he had to jump over. But I think it was desperation, and he did the best he could, and took into account the full equation that he saw, of which what you said was just a factor, and it was overruled by another factor.
Yeah, I have to agree. I also think that in this situation, I think they were damned if they did and they were damned if they didn't. I think the strategicness of putting him on the stand was, I think his lawyer, the defense wanted, like Big Jeff was alluding to, they wanted to see him being who Brendan is, that the one that has the lower IQ. And if the jury could see that would make them maybe question, how much he would have understood what was going on, or the fact that, this is just when he made those statements that he was just didn't understand it. The reason why I said the opposite to that is the jury could also look at it and think that, again, this is a personal opinion, but they could think, instead of thinking that he was just manipulated in terms of making up a story because he was being fed it by the law enforcement, they could have actually projected that like he was manipulated by Stephen Avery, so he was able to do all this because he was just directed to do what was allegedly said he did. So I really don't think it would have, I think it hurt him as much as he could have gained from it, in terms of why they chose to let him take the stand. What we do see of him taking the stand, I think he held his own quite well, considering that, that he does have challenges. But again, I think I totally agree with Big Jeff in this way, is the more coherent he sounded, the kind of, it hurt his character, because the defense was saying, this is a kid of low IQ. He wasn't when he was interrogated, he was misled and he was misguided and he was fed information and he wasn't smart enough to understand that. Yet when you've got him up there understanding direct questions in a atmosphere of intensity and awkwardness, and he's able to cope, they kind of go, you want us to believe he couldn't understand it in the interrogation, but he's well and truly able to understand it here. So I completely understand where Big Jeff was coming from. Again, I think it was a win-lose situation. He gained nothing, but he could have also won if he could have won the jury at this stage if it came across relatable and credible and he told the story and they believed it. That's all I got.
I think that, that's both of you that made some really good points. And I'll point out that Buting, as you all recall, and for those newer, they may not know, Buting and Strang had paid for this child psychologist. It was a done deal. And Fremgen and Edelston, they didn't use him. And I'm pretty sure that it was Buting. It may have been Strang. I don't remember. It was one of the two. I actually think that he made contact a couple of times with these guys and said, "Look, this guy's paid for. Why don't you let this guy talk to Brendan and see what you get from him?" He was, I think, a child psychologist, probably something even more, a little bit more educated than that. I'm probably saying it incorrectly, but nonetheless, it was a guy that could, understood Brendan's situation, his intelligence level, and all that, and he could have potentially made a difference. But even beyond that, not doing that, I wish they had prepared Brendan a little bit more to refute, or basically say, I'm talking about context, and as talking about how Kel's talking about he's on the stand and how he presented himself, answering questions and that kind of thing in the courtroom, you could definitely tell that Brendan was certainly nervous. But it's kind of the same Brendan, kind of a little bit withdrawn in that shell, versus him being in the interrogation room when he was talking to Mark and Tom on March 1st. And the lawyers pointing out, and I don't think they really did a good enough job of pointing out this direct difference between the two. And it is a big difference. Whether I don't necessarily think that people think of it on those terms, but we kind of have to for Brendan, because he's in two really significantly different situations. He got yanked out of school and brought down to the HQ to give this statement. I just wish that they had prepared him to say, look, maybe not how I'm going to say it, but in his terms, I just told them what they wanted to hear. I repeated back the things they were telling me. So, and he didn't do that. And I think that hurt him. But I think because they didn't have any evidence against Brendan forensically. I think he really almost had to get on the stand to refute his statement. I don't think there's really much anywhere around it, hurt him or not, right? Like Kel said, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I do. Brendan Dassey, Dassey.
Morning, Brendan.
Morning.
How old are you, Brendan?
17.
Where were you living on October 31, 2005?
With my mom.
Who all lived in that general area?
Me, my family, Steven, Chucky, my grandma and grandpa.
Okay. Now, you said that Steven, that's your uncle?
Yes.
And he lived where exactly in relation to your house?
Next door.
About how far from your house?
A few 100 or 200 or 300 yards away.
Okay. Yards or feet? Do you know the difference between the two?
Not really.
Okay. Was it farther than a football field away from you?
No.
Okay, so less than a football field away from you.
Yeah.
On October 31, 2005, was it a normal day for you?
Yes.
Now, did you go directly home from getting off the bus that day?
Yes.
What'd you do when you got home that day?
I play video games.
What did you do after you were done playing video games?
I ate food.
Okay. What was Blaine doing?
He was in the kitchen holding his duffel bag.
Was he going somewhere?
Yeah.
Where was he going?
Trick or treating.
Okay, what did you do after you were done eating?
I went into my mom's room and talked to her about that I asked her, or she told me that she was going with Scott to the hospital to see his mom.
What did you do after your mom left?
Watch TV.
Do you know how long you watched TV?
Until around 6 o'clock when I got a phone call.
Who called?
Blaine's boss.
Do you know for certain it was 6 o'clock or around 6 o'clock he called?
Yeah.
And how do you know that for certain?
Because he called after my mom left.
So sometime after 5:30 he called.
Yes.
What'd you do then?
I watched TV until I got another phone call at around 7.
Okay, and who called you around 7?
Steven.
What did Steven call you about?
He asked me if I wanted to come over to the bonfire.
What did you do when you got down to the fire?
He told me that he wanted to pick up the yard, and we drove around the golf cart and picked up stuff.
Okay. What kind of stuff did you pick up?
Wood, tires, an old cabinet, and the van seat.
Now, is this stuff that's just lying around your yard?
Yes.
Did you throw them on the fire?
Some of it.
What'd you do with the rest?
Piled it right by the fire.
So now you're watching the fire for a while, right?
Yes.
What are you doing?
I only can recall that Steven was talking to me about a phone call that he got from Jody.
When you got home, was anyone else home?
No.
Did you talk to your mom at all?
Yeah.
How'd you talk to her?
She called on the house phone.
What time did you go to bed?
After I got done talking to my mom.
Now, following October 31, 2005, did you lose any weight?
Yes.
How much did you lose?
5-10 pounds.
Were you doing this on purpose? Or
No.
you weren't trying to lose weight?
Well, I was trying to.
Okay. Why were you trying to lose weight?
Because people were calling me fat, and because I thought that my first girlfriend broke up with me because of my weight.
You mean first ever?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Theresa Halbach before?
No.
Now, you obviously know that name, correct?
Yes.
When was the first time that you recall hearing the name or seeing her picture?
When she was reported missing.
And how did you come about?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, Kelly, did you want to clarify something about the phone call that Brendan just had testified to?
Well, yeah. So he claims that he got a phone call from Stephen saying, "Come over for a bonfire." We have the records of this, and the phone records don't really reflect this call being made. In fact, the time we do see this phone call can be said maybe a few days prior is when you see this afternoon or evening phone call to the Barb's residence, and where it could be potentially a fire. The reason why I go back to the fire is because at this stage, everyone in the family had even Stephen originally had put the fire on a different day, not the 31st. They had put it a little bit later through the week. I think Blaine and Bobby had put it around the 1st or the 2nd. Stephen himself didn't even think that it was the 31st when we originally go back and listen to his statements, until he's actually kind of convinced through Barb, through a phone call we hear where she's like, no, it was definitely the 31st because I remember it was the night that me and Scott went and visited his mum. So again, when he's sitting up on the stand and he's talking about, mum called as well and said, and then he even references where my mum called and said, put on a jacket and send Brendan home. That phone call isn't in the logs. That doesn't exist that night either. So again, it makes you go back to question is he's off in his timeline on the stand. So, and the sad thing is his defense aren't saying to him, they don't correct it. They don't say, you just heard our client say this, timeline, but he didn't even get the friggin' timeline right himself. He's off because we have the proof that these calls weren't happening. J Jax, do you want to follow up that?
Yeah, indeed, I do. I can. Jeff, you want to go first? You're the next down. You got something to add?
Well, just that it's not like the phone records weren't available to corroborate this. I mean, it's Kel's absolutely right that this stinks. Why wouldn't the defense think that they shouldn't have looked at these logs to verify that these calls actually happened or not? It just doesn't. It doesn't. It's sort of lack of responsibility on their part. You didn't get this call, Brendan. What are you talking about? You can't go say that. This could be disputed in 5 seconds. So it doesn't make any sense that that they should let him make false statements like that. If his recollection's that fuzzy, that's what he should say.
Yeah. So let's take this whole thing into account, and I'll break this down as best I can. My personal belief, the fire did not happen on the 31st that they're all talking about. Yet, for law enforcement purposes, it really needed to be on the 31st. So the manipulation of the date began relatively early. And in fact, there really wasn't much of any conversation. If you go back to the beginning, around the, first, second, third, there really wasn't much talk of a fire at all. There really isn't. That didn't happen until a little bit later. And they really needed that fire to happen around that time. So let's take this, let's break this back down. So there was supposed to be a fire. I think they had talked about having one around the 28th, if memory serves, around that time frame. And there was a phone call, and Kel talked about this. Remember, Kel, we talked about this here a few months ago, and I can't remember if it was you or someone. I created a key call. We put it in the playlist on Foul Play. We put it in that call, or the series of calls where Barb is talking to Stephen, and he says, I think it was the week before. So we're talking about the 25th or 26th, somewhere in that time frame. A week prior to Halloween is what he's referring to. She's like, no, and he says, I think he says something like, well, was there a fire, when, I can't remember if he asked her if it was a fire when her and Scott went to the hospital. I don't know. Nonetheless, let's just leave that where it's at. But there is a phone call where they are talking about it, and she pretty much convinces him that it was the 31st. Now, if we take that and move forward, let's talk about Brendan for just a second, since we're on Brendan. There was an interview by Skorlinski. I can't remember who was with him, and I believe this was on the 10th of November. I think they were in Crivets again. I think that's right. And Skorlinski got really rough with Brendan. He got really shitty with him. But Brendan told him he thought that the fire was on the 1st or 2nd, as Kel alluded to, and I think Blaine and Bobby did as well. So we got that into account. My final point, let's talk about Scott Tadage. He gives a statement on November 10th. He didn't say a damn thing about a fire. Nothing. 19 days later, on the 29th of November, he gives his second statement. And in that statement, he gets prompted, and I don't remember if it was Skorlinski or it was one of the agents that prompted him to say, well, didn't Barb say that there was a fire or something? They brought it up. They brought the fire up. He didn't. And it basically, I think I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but he basically goes on to say, well, if that's what she said or something of that nature. Of course, as far as we know, those two interviews are not recorded for some reason. I don't really understand that, but I think this whole thing about the fire, they really needed it to be on the 31st for their purposes, and it got manipulated. I think when they talked to Barb, and we've got several interviews with her, and starting around the, I'm going to say this wrong, so I won't. I'll try to get a reference to when her first interviews were, but she did several there early, mid-November. So That's my 2 cents about the fire. And I don't think it was on the 31st.
I just wanted to add to that. So when I go back and I like try to match timelines and stuff, and I think a lot of us in the community have done this, we have that, Barb's phone call saying, no, Steve, I'm pretty sure it was the 31st. And you're right, J-Jack, she references it as a point of remembrance because she links it to, I remember when we went to see Scott's mum, I saw you at the fire. That's how she kind of links it to him. And he goes, oh, well, like you said, if that's what you think, then yeah, fuck, I didn't even think. I thought it was earlier. When you go back to all their beginning interviews, and for example, like Bobby Dassey, he had his very first talking to on the 5th of the 11th. And he does, everyone goes, he didn't even mention a fire. Like a lot of them didn't even mention a fire. No, they didn't, because a fire wasn't even part of the narrative, even for the law enforcement, until Josh Redant brings it up. It was Josh Redant on the 5th, the very first person that puts a fire on that Avery salvage yard. None of the Averys or the Dasseys bring up a fire. It was Josh that gave that narrative to law enforcement. He planted the seed. He's the very first statement that says, when I was driving, I looked over and I saw a fire. Now, he originally says, and please, if I'm wrong, let me know, but I'm sure he says he saw it coming from a barrel, a burning barrel at Stephen Avery's.
That's
so
right.
He's the one that places a fire on the 31st on the salvage yard. The next catch is, there's that speculation. Could they have seen it? Could he have seen it or whatever? But he's the one that starts the entire fire scenario, period. And this is where I get really kind of like scratch my head. He had a like it was planned, because you got to remember, he was the one that asked Stephen to burn his brush. So he was expecting a fire that week. So he was expecting some kind of fire in terms of creating one. He was the one that helped produce it, because he asked Stephen, hey, while you're at it, burn my rubbish. So I just wanted to add that, because it's part of the narrative. It's part of the timeline. It was actually Josh that created the fire. It wasn't, in fairness to Barb, yeah, she's the one that convinced Stephen eventually that is, but at this stage, she was probably convinced because of law enforcement who had echoed it off Josh. So they're saying to her, no, we have a witness now that has a fire there, so try to remember. And then she's like, probably thought, okay, then, well, yeah, it must have been that night I went to her. So it kind of, you got to always go backwards, and it's the devil in the detail, where it originated from. And it was Josh.
So just to clarify a little bit, I think that the deal that Stephen made with Redant was there was a lot of brush behind his house, and Stephen said, if you cut my brush down too, I'll burn all of it. So that was kind of that was the sort of the quid pro quo that went on. But even if there was, let me tell you, no matter how much brush there was, there's not enough there to support the burning of a body. They did not have enough fuel. They did not have enough time.
Hearing about her being missing.
My mom called. She told me to turn on the news.
So you watch TV?
Yes.
I have nothing else, Judge.
Just to see the chains on him, it just makes me sick, because I know what kind of boy he is, Glad I'm going to see him, because, he appreciates me coming down, and, I know that because I can see it in his eyes. He had a dream that when he was up on the stand and everything, and he says, just as it was ending, somebody came out with a black robe on, and they flipped the top out, and it was Theresa, and she was alive. And it was all a joke.
Mr. Dassey, let me play something for you, and I want to ask you a couple of questions, all right?
Okay.
Why didn't you just call 911 or tell me at 5 o'clock when I got home? Were you afraid of him?
Well, yeah.
We have 1 minute left. What?
He's stronger than me.
Yeah, well, if you would have came home and told me.
Yeah, but then I thought that I would have to go to jail too.
No, you wouldn't have.
Yeah, for knowing about it.
You wouldn't have gotten much out of it then, Brendan. You would have been more or less a hero. She would have probably still been alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look at that one on TV where that alligator ate this one girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. That's all you would have had to done, because I would have put you in the truck and we would have left.
Why didn't you tell your mother at 5 o'clock what you had seen earlier?
Because it really didn't happen.
Was Theresa Halbach alive at 5 o'clock, Mr. Dassey?
She was never there when I was there.
Never where, sir?
I never seen her there.
Mr. Dassey, you told the officers that you were there and Theresa was alive.
Yes.
She was alive.
But it really didn't happen.
You made that all up.
Yes.
You just happen to know Theresa's words?
No.
How do you know what she said?
I made it up.
You made it up.
Yes.
You made up the part that you raped her?
Yes.
You made up the part that she told you not to do it?
Yes.
To do the right thing?
Yes.
And to tell your uncle not to do it?
Yes.
You made that up?
Yes.
No. Mr. Dassey, didn't you tell your mother in a phone call on May 13th that you had gone over to your Uncle Stephen's after school and before she came home?
Yes.
And on May 15th, she's asking you why you didn't tell her. Why didn't you?
So this is where we get into the interview that O'Kelly and Kaczynski colluded with Fassbender and Wiegert and with Ken Kratz, because he's the one that approved this May 13th hearing without a lawyer. To this day, I still don't understand how this was ever allowed. Ultimately, Kaczynski got thrown off of Brendan's case because of this May 13th interview. So how could any of that be allowed to be played in court? I just don't understand how Fox has ever justified that, or, moving on up through the process of Brendan's appeals. I don't think it was really argued in the Seventh Circuit, but I do think I'd have to go back and I'm probably going to do this maybe on an open mic or something. Reread Duffman's 91-page brief. I do think he discusses it. Kaczynski got thrown off the case, but ultimately Ken Kratz is the one that approved that interview, and nothing happened to him, and I do not understand that.
Well, I think we saw, Jack, earlier in the previous episode how Wiegert and Fassbender tell Brendan that you better tell your mother before she hears it from somebody else. And I think you're exactly right that that call was, I think, in response to essentially Wiegert and Fassbender telling them that telling Brendan that Brendan better tell Barb before she hears it from them. or else, something is going to happen that he's not going to like. They scared him into that. That phone call was totally provoked by the action that Wiegert and Fassbender had with Brendan. I think on that very day, earlier in that day. And it doesn't surprise me that Brendan can't even remember it, to the point where he said, "Well, Mark told me that I better tell my mom." So that's what happened out of that. That would have been a better. That would have been a better thing to say than what he is saying, and coming off as a big liar, because he can't remember that particular facet of that interaction.
Yeah, it was at the end of that hearing, that interview, coercion session, as I often call it, with when he was on May 13th. It was at the end, because if you remember, Uyghur says, "Well, when are you going to tell your mom?" And Brendan says, "Well, she's supposed to come up tomorrow. Don't you think you should call her and let her know?" Because, basically he's saying, if you don't, I will. I actually think he might have said that. So that prompted that phone call. He goaded him into it. There's no doubt about it. You're correct. But the whole thing itself being set up, this entire thing was set up by Kaczynski, O'Kelly, going to, I think a phone call happened to Fassbender, maybe Wiegert. I don't remember the exact series of calls, but then ultimately it was Ken Kraft's decision to allow it without his lawyer. It's like, man, what are you doing? Kaczynski gets thrown off the case. Nothing happens to Kraft at all legally, and it should, in my opinion, it should have, because he's he's the prosecutor, and I don't care if he was after him or not to get a conviction. His job is bigger than that. He has to make sure everything is right and fair for both sides. And he didn't do that, and he was allowed to get away with it. And then on top of that, Fallon is allowed to play sections of this phone call to his mother. So I don't know. I think it's just bad business.
To the police.
Yes.
Are you lying? You're lying today?
No.
How is it that you were able to tell the police officers so much detail about what happened to Theresa if you weren't there?
I don't know.
What do you mean, sir? You don't know?
I could have got it out of books.
Out of books?
Yeah.
What book that you read ever had the story of a woman chained to a bed, raped, stabbed, and then her body thrown on a fire? What book was that, sir?
I believe it was called Kiss the Girls.
All right. Who wrote the book?
I don't remember his name.
Mr. Dassett, please look at Exhibit 208.
Yeah.
You drew that, correct?
Yes.
That's your depiction
Yes.
of Theresa Halbach chained to the bed.
I don't understand.
Is that your description? Is that how she looked when you saw her on the bed in Uncle Stephen's bedroom?
I didn't see it.
You just made that up.
As I said, I got it out of that book.
Exhibit 210, you drew this as well, sir, correct?
Yes.
That is your description of Theresa on the fire in the burn pit.
Yes.
You made that up?
Yes.
She's not dismembered in that picture.
You told the officers on February 27th you saw body parts.
Yes.
You told your cousin Kayla you saw body parts in December.
No.
No. She just made that up?
Yes.
Okay. How is it that you and Kayla both came up with telling and seeing body parts in the fire if you never talked about it?
She could have heard it on the news.
What newscast would that have been, sir?
I don't know.
You're seeing body parts in the fire? What newscast was that?
I don't know, but I heard that they found bones.
How do you feel about this today, right now?
That I just want to go home.
That's all you feel right now? You just want to go home?
Well, it's unfortunate that that Dr. Silkman is still a little bit under the weather because he has an excellent video, and we should link it in the description of this document with regard to the contents of Kiss the Girls and how it corroborates with Brendan's confession very closely. Particularly in the part, well, there's a lot that corroborates, and there's nothing particular. But the one that always strikes me is the fact that what did you do to her head? And the answer is he cut her hair. Well, that happens in the movie, and it wouldn't surprise me if Brendan maybe did have this book as a reading assignment, instead of reading it, he watched the movie, because that is something that happens. There is a major motion picture. I think it's Morgan Freeman is in it, if I'm not mistaken. It is a decent movie, there are a lot of similarities to what Brendan says happens with this movie. So he pulls from his knowledge base, his limited knowledge base. And Silkman even suggested that this movie might have been playing at Fox Hills, on one of the free premium channels that you sometimes get during his stay there, because it was very popular at that time. So you should watch that movie, and I think maybe when Dr. Silkman comes back and Brendan comes up again in Man 2, then he can walk us through a little bit of the sort of the finer points of that video. It's been too long since I've watched it. I probably should have watched it in preparation for this, but I didn't. But it's really brilliant in the way that it lays out the contents of the book and the movie, and how it corroborates with some of the things that Brendan said over the course of the confession. And the cutting of the hair is the one that always strikes me. So with that, I'll hand it back.
There's just briefly, Cal, I know you got something to say, but I do remember there was conversation, and I'm going to, maybe it's in Dr. Silkman's video, of the context of, it's possible that movie was on when they were at Fox Hills and you watched it. I just remember a section, and it may not even be related to this at all, that Brendan or not Brendan, but Uyghur Fassbender said to Brendan, just, play it back like a video in your head or something to those words. I can't remember exactly, and I should have prepared for that.
Play the movie in your mind, I think he says.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. But I think there was I don't know that this is true, but I do remember there was some conversation that potentially that movie, he may have watched that movie, or at least parts of it, while they were at Fox Hills, ended up in the hotel. I don't know. Maybe I'll watch Dr. Silkman's video and we can discuss it more the next time.
I was just going to say it's a little bit more picky, and I'm not even sure if it was worth bringing up, so you can always edit it out. But it was more about the detail. I remember that Dr. Silkman used to almost smash his iPad with the devil of the detail in terms of the picture, the way it was drawn and the layout in the picture, and how it's doesn't reflect of how Stephen Avery's bedroom was. I know it's not kind of. I'm not sure if that was, this is where I get confused. I'm not sure if it was the layout of the picture, how he drew it was inaccurate, or when he originally says that when he walked down, he saw her to the bed, and that, again, that it would be impossible because the bed wasn't facing that way. Again, you can edit this out if the boys clarify that, but I just wanted to touch base on that because they're pointing to his picture as the truth, but does the picture itself reflect a truth?
That's a good question, Cal. I think the biggest most easily diffused part of that picture is the shackles, the chains, right? You can clearly see chain links going from her wrists to the bedposts. And it's just not possible if she was alive at that time that there weren't scratches, from the, the part of the chain that attached the bedpost on the wooden bedpost itself. It's just not possible that such things, weren't there and it didn't chip in. So, that to me is, pretty much, part of the proof that, that this is a big fat lie. Do they show the door? In that picture, I don't recall. I think they just kind of show the bed. It is kind of interesting how he draws it with the with the head towards the bottom, the head of the bed towards the bottom of the page. I'm not sure why he would do it like that. If indeed that's the case, even the very intro, like in the intro to Making a Murderer, right before they start to cut to the show, they show the view into Stephen's bedroom as if you were walking in the front door and walking towards that bedroom. If that orientation of that bed is meant to represent that, kind of when you walk into that room, you'd be and look to the left, you'd be standing at the foot of the bed. If that's the case, then there's no way that Brendan would have been able to see Theresa on the bed from the doorway. He would have had to go over to the room. And again, this gets back to the whole thing. If Brendan knocks on the door, Stephen comes and answers the door. When he's in the middle of this shenanigans. There's just so much about this that doesn't make any sense at all. That it's hard to know even where to go with the story that they fished out of Brendan.
And scared.
Okay. Do you feel sorry for Theresa?
Well, I know everybody feels sorry for losing someone.
What do you feel?
I feel sorry for him.
Why?
Because I know how it feels to lose someone that you love.
And you're telling us today that you had nothing to do with the death of Theresa Halbach?
No.
Why did you tell the officers that you did?
I don't know.
That's all.
Redirect. What was the part that you made up?
Well, the stuff that didn't really happen is the stuff that I made up.
And what stuff didn't really happen?
Where I was over there before 5 o'clock, where I helped him kill her and rape her and that.
Why should this jury believe you today?
Because I didn't really do it.
When the officers would tell you this is not your fault, how did that question or how did that comment in the question make you feel?
That I wouldn't be taken away from my family and put in jail.
No matter what you said?
Yeah.
I have nothing else, Judge.
I was just wondering if he was going to tell the truth or not. I didn't expect him to.
Yeah, I'm tired of listening. I'm tired of listening to him. He has no expertise per se. He's essentially acting as a shill for the state, as has already been pointed out earlier. I'm not really even sure why the filmmakers thought it appropriate to put it into this documentary in the first place, other than to try and get some negative reaction out of people. So because that's certainly the way that it hits me now, and that's the way that it hit me the first time that I ever watched it. Was he doesn't really know what happened, and that there's really no reason to believe Brendan's confession. Period. So.
Watching this again this time through, I want to say that I felt like Brendan kind of held his own better than I remembered it last time. And I felt that he was answering clearly to the questions. Obviously, he's he's really thinking about it, and he understands now what's going on. And they asked him straight out. That was a really important question that they asked him. You thought that no matter what you said, you weren't going to be taken away from your family and put in prison. Yes, absolutely. And I think that I don't understand how a jury could convict this young man. I guess that's for them and their conscience, and we can that's another discussion for another time. But I think we're at the point today where we're going to have to wrap up the episode, and that means that it's the lightning round, and it's Big Jeff's turn to lead off the wrap up comments. Which
yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think this does the trial's getting pretty close to closing arguments. After the defendant speaks in his own defense, it's usually the last thing. So we're really close to the end of the trial. And I think we as the panel summarized it very well, over the past couple of episodes. The Stevens conviction, combined with the other factors like the March 1st press conference and the ongoing negative coverage in the media, and the unending bloviating by the Mike Halbach, that that they had already set it in their minds. I mean, the jury was well positioned by the prosecution, particularly Kratz, to be dead set against Brendan. He had much too high of a hurdle to jump over to be innocent. His testimony, as you said, Jeff, I think it was maybe better than you remember it from the first time. But it still wasn't good enough. He was, and I'm not sure whether being more coherent or less coherent would have been better for him. And maybe there's nothing he could have said, like Kel said, damned if you do or damned if you don't. It's in my mind, it's this. We're watching the biggest screw job of all times. Brendan was a victim of the state's failing case against Stephen, and that's the one I that's the hill I die on.
Well, thank you, Big Jeff. And Jack, moving on to you, if you would have any wrap-up comments for today.
I think overall, not too much. I do agree with Jeff about Mike Halbach. He's basically both now. He's called Kayla a liar, and he's called Brendan a liar. And I think his words kind of betray him in several sections. He says he didn't watch the full interview from March 1st. There's just so many things that it's like he's accepted what he's been told from other people without doing his own kind of thing. He's being, again, the spokesman for the police and the state, because they've been told to shut their fucking mouth, don't talk about it publicly, because they had done so much damage already anyway, and Willis didn't do anything. There is one more point, and in it, this maybe is a minor point, but maybe it's not. And because they did separate the trials, the two defendants, at the same time, it's a little bothersome to me. Maybe people think it would have overburdened Willis to handle both trials, but the trials are connected. So why isn't he handling both trials? So he would have access to all of the information, and he could have made better decisions, or at least more informed decisions. I think that as defendants that really should have been tried together, because they were tied together for basically since the beginning of the event. I mean, that didn't come out until March 1st, but it doesn't matter. It stretches all the way back to the year before on October 31st. So basically for 15 months or 16 months, whatever, they were tied together as co-defendants in this event, this alleged murder of Theresa. And yet they go and separate it. 2 trials, 2 judges, 2 juries. But Willis could have done both trials. I know it would have been in ways difficult for him, taking on an extra burden. But at the same time, he would have had, he could have made better decisions overall, I think. And I don't think they wanted Willis to do both trials. So that's just an opinion. I think it was really difficult watching Brendan and the sequence as it always is. It's maddening, hearing Fallon just hammer on him, then being able to use that portions of that phone call from May 13th that they included and got, and Fox let in. I think it was legally. I just don't know how he did it, but he did, and they've gotten away with it since then. So difficult episode to watch, but I think we've explored it well. That's all I got.
Same with everyone's thoughts. Anything to do with Brendan is really, really hard. When you watch him be vulnerable on the stand, and I say vulnerable because, again, I think we all agree that he may have been prepped to a certain degree, but not to the point that, could have been more impactful to the jury and for the court. Hearing him say, again, this is just nitpicking, but I heard him say, they questioned about him losing weight and little things like that. That's like, it's exposure and embarrassing for him. He's a young teenager, who's already got probably, self-confidence issues, and then he's having to tell them, justify why he lost weight, and that's because he hated himself because he couldn't keep a girlfriend. Like that. That's so sad to hear things like that. And yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for all the input. It's always great to have a good balance and a great panel, and the supporters in the channel when they join us for the premiere. Always we get some great comments in there that we do come back and we talk about after. And yeah, thanks everyone. And again, really painful and hard episode.
Really appreciate everybody's input today on this case. This is one of the harder ones that we've had to get through, that's for sure. And I know that I could probably talk about this, for another hour if we had the time, but it is time to move on today. And so I just want one last reminder to say thanks to everybody, to Kelly and Big Jeff and Jack, for making a great discussion, and everybody who's been following along in chat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you share us on your social media, it's the cheapest and most effective way to help the podcast grow. And we really appreciate everything you've done so far. And this has been Discussing a Murderer.